welcome everyone, and thank you, Brian, being on the Skype. Thank you for coming. Team is going to present first. We have back-to-back two master presentation today, and this is both our non-thesis masters. They're defending for that. And team has been working on this project, looking at the beneficial effects of video games. This is the making for some time, and he is about to complete data collections, and he has some preliminary results, and maybe he can explain what he anticipates in the results and the broader implication of that. And I told him to just do 35-minute presentation, then leave time for questions.
Yep.
And a little bit about the when Team joined the group. I went through the email as far as back I could go, and Team asked me a question about the admission to Georgia State in
2015.
And he asked a question about the research, and he had a question about grains of causality, and he figured it out, and he knew that this is right. And I said, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely right. And he gave it I'm pleased with this progress.
It'll come.
Hopefully there will be a few publications will come. Okay.
Thank you so much. So, like Dr. Damala said, we're going to be looking at my results thus far for looking at video games of the brain. What we'll be doing, so first I'll give you some background about the state of gaming and gaming research and what sort of brought us to where we are now. I will then go over what we personally aim to look at next for the field of research and what we thought we'd see. Thought is a very key word. Go over what we did, what we've seen thus far, and what lies ahead for our research. So, as Layla, you were saying earlier, you view video games very bad for your son. A lot of parents do. Everyone thinks they're a waste of time, they cause ADHD, ruin your eyesight, kill your memory because kids are always going, what? Huh, I forgot, and so on. And they don't really teach any skills. They'd rather you learn how to change the oil of your car or some other skill that we've grown up to be thinking that teaches us something valuable. But those skills teach you one thing in particular. Video games provide the same necessity. And so this sort of spurred a whole new era of research about, okay, let's stop perceiving, going off our perception of what we think video games do, and let's start looking at it. So what is video game research found thus far? All these are completely wrong. None of this less. Yes, completely wrong. And this doesn't even include the research that's shown that video games don't cause people to be violent at all either. And there is research out there to say that.
But that's a big claim.
It is.
It means I should find the case for.
Your perception does not create reality. The data creates the reality. And the data says you're wrong. The data says that we can show that these video games can be utilized to train certain neurological skills. And what we're hoping is that it can train transferable skills in the real world. And so what have video games actually shown? They show us that you can increase attentional ability. People are able to focus longer durations, and they can also tune out things and focus better. You're staring at a screen. Oh, you just sent out the email, didn't you? Why is my audio on? You're staring at the screen and you've noticed that you've ignored someone talking to you the entire time. And that is a very high level of focus that is not often perceived. So if we can train that helps us better attend to things and maintain our focus for longer durations. In terms of just capabilities outside of that, It actually helps vision. I'm a personal case where I was actually part of such a study, and what it found is that you're basically training your eyes as if they were a muscle. So after playing games for so long, you're able to resolve things closer together spatially, as well as resolve blurry objects better. So, things that normally would be a little obscured and you're like, what is that? I can't make it out. You're able to resolve that shape a little bit easier. On top of that all, like I said, you can narrow in, but weirdly enough, it also increases your field of view by helping you perceive your peripheral vision much better. So you don't grow this main field that you see primarily out of, that's fixed, but you perceive your peripheral vision significantly better to where you can respond and attend to those stimuli much quicker. Other things they found, working memory, the average person usually can only balance about 4 things in their head. On average, that's about what it is, which is why when you're having a thought and someone distracts you and you can't trace it back, you basically chucked it out of your brain and it's no longer in working memory, and so you can't do it. Video gamers, on the low end, working memory they have so that they can remember more and work on things and multitask better. And then the other key one is the information processing. So everyone, you take in information. Right now you're taking in what I'm saying and you're processing my words. Video gamers can take in that stimulation and process it faster, quicker. It's a key thing. I mean, you see gamers that just kind of like see something on the screen, they have to hit a button, they have to respond, they have to make a decision about something. So these are all very good results. These are all things that tell us things, but they're also very basic results. These are not really advanced networks and advanced processes in our brain. They're kind of the base functionality of it. So what is that? Where does that lead us? What can we also examine a higher order process? Do these video games benefit us in a way that can go on to an everyday process that requires multiple networks to interact with one another in sync or in tandem, one following the other? Can we train these as well? And so far, a lot of these processes kind of lead us to one area that we'd hope to see improvement, and that is decision making. Decision making requires that you be able to attend to a task for a long duration of time in a focused manner, as to be able to just knock out distractors and useless information. And then you must take that information after processing it and weigh it on its conflicts, its pros and its cons, and then finally give your response in whatever form needed, whether it be a button press, a verbal confirmation, some motor movement. And this is a very high-end process. That's why you can study animals, but animals don't really have high or order decision making. It's very much a human thing. And so we've done research in the past. We know what areas to look at in decision making, and we've used stimuli before. So since video games seems to fit all the criteria for wanting to look at decision making areas, that's what we wanted to look at. We wanted to give non-gamers and gamers a decision making task so we can compare their performances and see what the differences between them are. Specifically, we wanted to see how their performance changed between gamers and non-gamers. We wanted to see if there was a benefit or a deficit caused by playing video games on just making decisions. We wanted to see also how the type of game you play would affect it, because those who play video games, not all games are created equal. Just because you're good at one game doesn't make you good at another. Kind of like just because you can play basketball doesn't mean you'd be a great NFL player. Same exact concept here. So video games should be considered together when compared to a non-gamer group, but in themselves they should also be compared separately because they train different portions of the brain, or at least theoretically they should. And lastly, we wanted to examine if there is a difference in the performance, what causes this? What regions are activated in one group that's not activated in another? Or how are they talking to one another differently when you can compare gamers and non-gamers? So what we predicted going into this, Flat out, easiest prediction, gamers are just going to beat non-gamers. They have the increased attention, they have the increased information processing. They should easily outperform non-gamers in all areas. Likewise, we would predict that because the executive network and your science network are required, these attentional networks and this decision network are required for this task, we would expect to see a higher connectivity between the two. We would expect that the two regions would talk to each other in more synchronous action, as well as higher amplitude of, or higher frequency of communication, so that they're going back and forth much faster. And then for gamers and non-gamers, we started off with just, we expected to see a difference in performance, first and foremost. We wanted to see where they performed different so we can know where to look between the gamers. And that was the hope, that we would see some form of performance difference between the two. Unfortunately, that hope was squashed, but not completely. So what did we do? We recruited so far, we've recruited 30 participants. We've got 30 more to go. I think actually we're a little higher than that. There were a few that came in after I put the cutoff for this presentation to be able to analyze in time. So we asked them to spend an hour inside of our fMRI machine where they would put their head inside this 32-channel coil. And inside this machine, there's a projector screen that they can see the stimulus on. And what we asked them to do was a simple decision-making task, but it couldn't be too simple because gamers have a very good grasp of how to break down something visually and figure out the flaws in it. If you've ever seen a gaming forum, usually it's someone saying, hey, the game's really hard, but the programmer has accidentally left this bug in here and it like gives away the whole game. And they sort of make it easier. So we had to make something that was a decision-making task, required high processing, as well as could not be predicted. And then groups were also brought up, divided up into these 5 groups, primarily all 4 of these groups versus the non-gamers. And then each of those, the only gamers we considered were first-person shooters, which is Call of Duty, Battlefield, etc. Multiplayer online battle arenas, or MOBAs for short, which is League of Legends, Smite sort of games. Real-time strategy, primarily StarCraft is the most popular one. And lastly, Battle Royale games. That was role-playing, but over the last 3 years, Battle Royale games have blown up so high in the market that we couldn't ignore them. These groups were based primarily off the top 4 demographically analyzed player categories. So whichever the gaming market always keeps track of who's playing what, so we took the top 4 there. And each of these games is very different. Some people who play may say the Battle Royale and first-person shooter are similar, but they actually require much more different decisions than just shooting each other. Because the one game, you have to decide ahead of time how to assemble your team. The other one, you have to decide on the spot, and things are also not readily available to you. You have to have a sort of game plan going in, just randomized where you put. So what kind of tasks can we do to really challenge these gamers? We did what's basically what's called a modified dot stimulus task. And what this asks is that players will be prompted for a color. They will then be shown 2 sets of dots going in opposite direction of one another. These dots will change speed and orientation every trial so that it won't be the same every time. And then they'll be given rest and they'll repeat that over and over. Oh, I have a better video on the next one. Don't worry. Yeah, no. This picture sucks. On the next slide, I'll show you a demo of what it actually looks like and you'll be able to see it. And so the way we were able to do it is we randomized the speed. It goes from not moving to the fastest moving possible before we sort of get that reversal vision effect. You've all experienced this. If you watch like tires on a car, it'll go from looking like it's going forward to all of a sudden it looks like it's going backwards. Same thing would occur here. If we sped them up too much, the dots would appear to be going in the wrong direction. They would appear that they are going in the other direction, and that just went up, so we can't have this effect. We also then had difficulty levels based on the color wheel. And the way we did it was primary versus secondary colors, or red versus yellow, very easy to tell apart. No one really gets confused there. Primary, but still not too difficult to tell apart. And then we have the hard difficulty, which is primary versus a tertiary color, which is these smaller dots right here, which is the combo of a primary and a secondary. And at slow speeds and even high speeds, sometimes it's really difficult. So let's do an example. So this will be an example of what our dot stimulus is. So see if you guys can tell me what direction they're going. Oh no. What the hell? Go. Play. Can anyone tell? Oh. Yeah, I think that's about right. I think that's actually correct. So, but you see how close together and difficult that is to tell. And that's, yeah. So, and as Anthony can vouch, when you're actually in the machine, they're going much faster. This is a slowed down demo because my computer can't run it at a fast speed. But so when you get there, non-gamers do okay. A lot of the time it's guessing, and some of them got lucky on a lot of them, but they didn't really confidently do it, whereas most gamers really did. So, here. There we go. So, we collected all of our data, and the next step is to fit the time series. We take these images, which are just a conglomeration of time series points from across the brain, and we need to fit that with our model of what we gave them. So first we have to input for motion outliers. That's taken out of the initial data because head movement, these measurements are very sensitive to movement. So even a matter of, I think it's 40 millimeters or 4 centimeters is 4 millimeters actually is too massive of a movement, and it causes really bad motion outliers. So we have to remove that from our data. And then next we need to tell the machine, we need to tell it when did things occur. And so we have to fit it right here with basically telling it, okay, this side is when the stimulus was up, and this side was when they were just resting and relaxing, and that should be their baseline essentially. And we run this through and we find out what sort of activations come out relative to each other. These are all relative motion. They're all relative because we don't know, there's no such thing as a human baseline that all people will have this baseline. So we have to do it relative to each person. So we'll look at the baseline, we'll look at the task, we'll subtract those from one another, and we'll do a straight out Z-score and take over a threshold to see what is activated significantly in the brain. We'll then take that data and we'll say, well, that's all nice. We see that these images, these things are lit up in the picture, but what does any of that mean? So next we need to do coherence tests. So we need to see if the time series of each region is synonymous with the other. Can they fire in some form of pattern together? And then we'll follow that up with saying, well, that's nice, but what direction are they going? So we need to look at the directionality of the way they're going. And what way we do this is essentially you have time series from each of them, and then you you model each one's data first by itself, and then with another region. So take region 1 here and region 2, we say, okay, they fire relative to one another. We know that they're coherent with one another. But in what direction is that coherence? Does one fire before the other? And so we model region 1, and we say, okay, we got the variance of this model. It fits pretty well, but not entirely. Let's add the data from region 2. We'll add the data from region 2, remodel, and see if we have a better fit now. If we do, the variance will be lower, and that means that the region 2 has to exert some sort of control over region 1. They have to have a causal flow for the other one. Otherwise, we wouldn't see any change in the variance calculations of the model, and the fit wouldn't matter, it wouldn't change. So we did all this. We looked at the models. We plotted out what was connected to what, and we did a simple t-test for the behavioral data. That was just a simple t-test between gamers and non-gamers, and an ANOVA test between gamer types. So what did we find? Well, not entirely what we expected. We expected they would destroy them in every category. But it looks like just overall, we see a slight improvement. If you take in general, you grade them across all types of stimuli, and just take it as a basically blank test regardless of difficulty, gamers do significantly better. If we take it across any one condition though, there was only a slight significance for the medium contrast. Otherwise, accuracy is pretty much the same. So, a little upsetting, but we also measured their response times to see how fast they were able to complete this task in. And there, we found much better results. We found that gamers absolutely destroy non-gamers in terms of making decisions and the time they can do it in. The average difference in response time for any task was about 350 milliseconds. So, that doesn't seem like a lot, but if you're doing a high-speed decision-making task like this one, 300 milliseconds counts as a lot. 300 milliseconds could be the difference between a car crash in real life. So it is a significant amount, and they beat them in all categories. And this is really good. This shows us that while video gamers may not be able to make more accurate decisions based on the information always, they will always be able to respond faster, which can be very key in certain situations. This is 20 gamers versus 10 video gamers, or 12 video gamers at this point, I think.
All statistical errors.
Yes. Yeah. So simple t-test with the errors, and I believe, this is the 0.99 error bars too. These aren't, so absolute significance. And then, so next, time to look at the difference between how gamers performed against each other. And this is where sort of the letdown came. No difference really. There's a little bit of fluctuation depending on who you get in there, but not much to really say there's any sort of performance difference. And although this is significant right here, we're predicting now that once we finish data collection, this will probably die out too, and we'll see we'll see that there's no real significant differences. But there's still hope for that yet, that there might be a difference between the two. But we'll get there later. So what did we see? So let's see the pretty brain images now. So this is effectively what brains of video gamers and non-gamers look like. So we see activations in V1 and V2, more commonly known as the occipital lobes. That's how you perceive vision. So of course we'd see it there. And then we have these the insula and the thalamus. The insula is responsible for your attentional control. Anytime you need to focus and you're making yourself focus and ignoring something else, you're using your insula. Your thalamus is your motor control and priming, so it's how your body basically gets ready to execute some form of motion. This is the dorsolateral anterior cingulate cortex, and this is also responsible for salience network, I believe. I always get that one confused. And so that works in conjunction with the insula to maintain your focus, as well as help to get rid of outliers in your vision that would distract you. And then lastly is your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, which is the main hub of where you make decisions. That is the primary core region of your decision-making network and what it's required. And last, I missed the label. So we have two more. So this is the paracingulate gyrus, which is connected to the cingulate cortex over here. That one's a bit of an unexpected one. It's been indicated in a lot of networks, and it's exact, at least when I looked up the research, it's not exact as to where its function lies in decision-making processes. So that one we still have to look into more and understand. The region I forgot to label are these two blocks right here. This is your superior parietal lobe, or also your posterior cingulate. No, PCC. I forget what it stands for, Dr. Damala.
Sorry.
PCC. I forget what PCC. It's posterior cingulate cortex. Okay, so it was cingulate. Okay. So your posterior cingulate cortex, this also comes into your executive networks. So like I said, this is all nice. We can see pretty images of things lighting up, but what does it mean? How are these guys connected? How are they talking to one another? And looking at,
So that's the activation you saw when you compare with the non-gamer, right?
so this is the group analysis of game. This was gamers, and then yeah, we verified it with non-gamers as well. So
So gamer versus non-gamer, or just the gamer?
this is a group analysis. So we individually analyzed each person, and then did the group analysis, and these were the remaining regions that didn't get knocked out by the group analysis.
But gamers want
This one is specifically gamers. We did verify though with non-gamers as well.
So this is not from the contrast. This is just from the.
This is one group, yes, one group's image right here. But it was, and the regions we chose were also based off of previous perceptual decision-making papers that Ganesh and Badan did. So it was half see where they're activated, and half previous research has shown us decision-making requires these areas, so we're looking at these areas. So analyzing them, we get this very confusing circuit diagram. And so just to sort of break it down, everything in black is what's activated in gamers. Everything in red is what's activated by non-gamers only. And everything in green is activated by both. Yeah, if you'll notice, there's no green. And that's the whole point. We expected to see that they would be activating the same type of network and just different connectivities and maybe one or two regions difference. But instead what we found was they have no overlap at all. Although some regions may be activated in both, their connections are vastly different. So if we take this image and we split it up into actually how they would look for each group, this is what we get. Video gamers have a very nice interconnected regions where everything sort of talks to one another. Gamers, not so much. Gamers are very, or non-gamers, yes, sorry, non-gamers, not so much. Non-gamers, basically, their thalamus is telling their brainstem, hey, we've been told that we're supposed to be giving a motor response, so prepare yourself and then execute it. Your DLPOC is say, hey, we've also been told we're gonna have to make a decision, so keep your eyes peeled. And then same thing, the executive network is telling the salience network, hey, we're supposed to be paying attention right now. But that's all they got. Gamers, on the other hand, a lot more talk between those two networks. And so let's look at that a little bit better. So gamers, interestingly enough, the motor network is the one causing the priming of the whole thing and the execution of the series. So the thalamus is basically saying, hey, we're gonna have information coming in soon. We're all ready to prime the motor response, but you all need to pay attention and talk to one another so we can get this done. And so it notifies, you have the insula and the anterior cingulate, prepping your salience network to attend to whatever pops up, and your conflict resolution executive network ready to take in that information from the thalamus and then doing so. Taking that information in, making the choice about it, and then popping it back over to the insula popping it back over to the thalamus to what your decision is and giving your response. The thicker lines are for higher significance of connections. So that means if we really only to see what the most key regions were, that's what these would be. So your attentional network and your executive networks, this is pretty much what we would expect, because those networks are dedicated to one another, so they would talk to each other a lot more. So what can we take away from this? What does this tell us as a whole? It tells us that video gamers are significantly better at decision-making tasks. So the effects that we saw in the effects that the previous studies saw in the baseline improvements also extend to higher order processes, and that this also is not a matter of different activations of areas, but different reorganization. Its communication to be able to complete this task at a better performance rate. And that there's no real different performance between gamers types so far. So far the research is right. There's no, you can take a blanket and put it over all gamers and that's fine. And that's what we've seen thus far. But we're concerned with the next step of what can we do with this? Like we've learned something nice, but what can we do? Well, we can train people. So this might, when we've done it in the past, you can train people to be better at anything. You can train them to be better at baseball. You can train them to be better at math. Why can't video games be used for the same? So what do we have next up? We want to first finish collecting data. We need population significance so that we can make sure we've knocked out anything insignificant that may currently still be around in our data. We want to then complete the analysis with all that in, because that will knock out some key regions maybe, or knock out some outliers between the two. We want to look at the diffusion images, which is basically so we know that these two regions are connected. We know that they talk to a certain extent, but now we want to know the specific structure of those regions. We want to look at how the water moves around them, which will tell us basically how they're connected. So how a neuron is shaped and how it is myelinated will change the water diffusivity around it. So we can look at that to see also what structural differences are, which may explain sort of the network reworking. And like I said, there's still hope for the difference between gamer types because, like I said, we want to train people. So maybe, although gamers can complete the task the same way, they are able to always have the same performance. They might activate different regions and different organizations to do this. So that diagram that I showed you before, this is for all gamer types. But if we were to take each group and individually lay them out, there may be significant connections to other regions or different connections between these that were knocked out in group analysis. So one group of video gamers may be better at training a connection than others. And that is very key because sometimes a deficit in someone is not the problem with the whole network, but instead the problem of one connection between two things. And so if one game can do that, we can then not only say that, okay, video games are good for you, but if you have this problem, this type of video game is good for you. And the hope is to examine that. And then lastly, once we've done that, collect some data from some trainees. Have groups play video games and see if we can reorganize from this to this. The brain is very plastic and reorganizes all the time. So hopefully they'll be able to do from this to this, which means we can train people to be faster decision makers in life and in general skills. That's it. I'd just like to acknowledge my advisor, Dr. Mala, for helping me get the funding and helping me figure out how to design this. Kieran and Sushma for answering my questions on fMRI design. And then a big thank you to my undergrads, because without them, I could not have coded half of this. The randomization codes for the dot stimulus required a lot more past my knowledge, and they definitely changed a lot. And lastly, Vish from CABI. He is the research advisor there who helps you sort of employ your imaging techniques and analysis methods. And he was there to help me. There's references for all the previous research, and that'll be it.